1 minute past midnight. I looked at Dolores and I said, this is it. This is what we have been waiting for. I don't believe that there are any more joyful people in all the world. And I think one part of it was that we had made a life commitment. And I know that there are varying mission philosophies today, which I'm not going to get into, but I would like to underscore the advantage of life commitment. That settles lots of problems. And when the difficulties arise, you don't have to start reviewing all kinds of options. And I just thank the Lord for the fact that the same joy that was present on that night as we took off is still present today. We started our missionary career with great adventure because of the fact, believe it or not, it took us 8 days to come from Miami to Quito by air. No, Pan American and Panagra. We missed our connection in Barranquilla and so had to fight for reservations to Bogota, to Cali, to Ipiales, and 8 days later arrived in Quito. What a surprise to land on a grass airstrip. I had only been in Ecuador from October to December, between Christmas and New Year, when I was involved in a bus accident that almost tore my left arm off and smashed many of the bones in it. But the most amazing thing is what God does in the hour of trial. I remember lying in the hospital in Chicago. It just seemed as though the Lord Jesus, by his very presence, was there. And he said, do you believe that I'm a God of love? I said, yes, I do. Then I desire your good. Do you believe that I'm a God of power? Yes. Then I can accomplish your good. Do you believe that I'm a God of wisdom? Yes. Then I know what's for your good. Well, you can't beat that combination, can you? I would never have been the kind of missionary that I was if I'd not had to go through this experience at the beginning of my missionary career. Talking about history, you know that Agatha Christie was married to an archaeologist. And she said it was wonderful to be married to an archaeologist because the older you became, the more interesting you were to him. In the midst of opposition, right, Ron, as we talked about it the last few days, it's marvelous to see how the Lord can work. Well, there's another happening that at first looked like a terrible tragedy, but through the years we have noticed that it has been remarkably blessed of God. 1956, January 8th, 1956. We got the word that 5 young men who had gone to reach the Aucas had not reported in. They were missing. Of course, we found later on that they had all been speared to death by the Aucas whom they had sought to reach. And when we got the news here in Quito, I was field director at the time, I called down to Marge by radio and said, I know that a lot of people are going to come to help, but if I can be of any help, I'm ready to go. And Marge said, Abe, I think that you can help. I think for some who are new here, you might have found it very difficult to follow when I talked about the Auca story and the martyrdom of the 5 fellows, and then called down to Marge in Shelmera. I called down to Marge Saint in Shelmera, little knowing that a little more than 10 years later, under the guidance of God, we would be led to merge our families. And that has been such a wonderful blessing. But before I get to that, I must touch another personal item that happened in 1965, or much earlier than that. In 1961, it was discovered that Dolores had cancer. And she had a mastectomy. It was all the usual treatment of radiation and chemotherapy. And at one point, we had to move to the States for a couple of years in order to get the right kind of medical attention. But then in the plan of God, under the will of God, on December 10th, 1965, Dolores went home to glory. And I use that term advisedly, because the one thing that we in our family remember so much is that the worse the disease became, the more radiant she became. And my children and I will never forget that testimony and that radiance. And I'm convinced more than ever that God gives dying grace. And it is so wonderful to know that whatever the trial is, if we go through it with the Lord, He has more than enough resource to meet our need. You know, I've somehow come to the conclusion that we might be much more aware of the trial and much more aware of the affliction and what is happening to us when it's a fatal physical trial rather than in some other areas. So I thank God for what happened in Dolores' life and ours, and in the life of our mission too, thank God, some of you who were present at that time. And that's a big loss. I have an idea that those of you who haven't faced that loss do not realize as much as you might how much of a loss it would be if your wife were taken or your husband were taken. And I feel pretty strongly that there's some of us who come to a second marriage much better prepared than when we come to our first marriage. We learn some lessons. And I just thank God that last month, on the 25th of August, Marge and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary. And I just can't thank God enough for His blessings to us and to our family. Just brought the children together, merged them wonderfully. All 6 are married, all married to Christians, all teaching their children the things of God. If Marge were here, she'd say 17 grandchildren. And I would just like to testify to the grace of God and the goodness of God and encourage our staff members in the Lord that, as we already said this morning, we can all be recipients of that overflowing grace and enjoy what I think Peter calls the grace of life. Jeremiah 33:3, call to me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things which you do not know. Zechariah 4:6, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. And we need them as much today as we needed them then.